Australians have long had an emotional attachment to East Timor. The images of violence when the Timorese forged their independence from Indonesia more than a decade ago are hard to forget. Now East Timor has a new battle on its hands. It's fighting some of the world's biggest oil and gas companies for back taxes that could run into the billions. In the lead up to the country's general election this weekend, Stephen Long prepared this report.
It waged a long struggle for independence and won.
Viva Timor-Leste!
Now the little country to our north has a new fight on its hands.
It is a David and Goliath fight.
A battle between big oil and a poor fledgling nation.
The importance of the petroleum revenue in general is vital for Timor-Leste.
A decade after independence, the country is still struggling to lift its people out of poverty. The Timor Sea holds a bounty of oil and gas, and that's a blessing and a curse for Timor-Leste. It's generated $10 billion in royalties and taxes, invested in a sovereign wealth fund.
It is the monies that will help stabilize the country. It is the monies that will help educate the people, feed people, give health care to those that are in need.
But its fragile economy is almost completely dependent on that petroleum revenue. 90% of its taxes come from a handful of foreign resources companies. For years, they got away without paying all that was due. Authorities in Timor-Leste didn't even audit them, taking the corporate giants at their word. But that changed about 18 months ago, with audits going back as far as 2005.
As part of that auditing process, they are discovering that there are areas where there were some discrepancies, and they're beginning to look at that more closely. And as they are discovered that the tax officials from Timor are raising those issues with the various corporations, operators, and are beginning to say, we believe that there are taxes due. Please pay them. If you have an objection, please state why.
Millions of dollars in back taxes have already been paid after 28 adverse assessments. But that may just be a drop in the ocean.
Let's just say hundreds of millions, and possibly into the billion amount.
It's time for the best people in the industry to show what they can do, to develop and collaborate.
But big oil is fighting back. ConocoPhillips, one of the world's major energy companies, is challenging the tax regime in court in Dili in what may be a precedent-setting case. Secretary of State, pleased to meet you. Stephen Long from 7:30 at the ABC. Alfredo Parish's family fled to Australia in '75 after Indonesia invaded and occupied East Timor. He studied geology and now heads the natural resources portfolio in Timor-Leste. The tax battle is considered so important that just days out from this weekend's election, he flew into Australia to brief 7:30 on the issue. What kind of difference could it make on the ground in East Timor? What would you be looking at that going to?
A lot. Housing, education, essential housing, basic housing. We have now a program to give the most poorest people of the country some very simple housing, and we like to expand that.
You have got a huge steak.
Well, let's just say I've got a lot of things on my plate.
You can say that again. Indeed. The day after our meeting, there was a whiff of scandal. News broke of a secret tape recording of Oli de Castro, the man advising Timor-Leste on how to invest its oil and gas revenues. He was in conversation with Australian associates in Darwin. The talk turned from Swiss bank accounts to offers of kickbacks from shady Singapore businessmen.
Even in Singapore.
What happened to the private jet?
I refuse to accept it, thank God.
And the apartment?
I refuse. Everything I refuse.
And what happened with that English trip? Bloody all expenses paid, first class, $10,000 bottle of wine.
What do you mean refused?
Who gets that?
Get it next year.
Even our government.
Oli de Castro issued a statement via his lawyer saying,
"Any fair-minded person listening to the tape would conclude that Mr. de Castro had discharged his professional duties with complete integrity."
The recording is political dynamite, leaked days before the election with the apparent aim of raising fears about the Sovereign Wealth Fund. The government and the opposition disagree on how the fund should be invested, but on the tax battle against big oil and gas, they're at one. And Timor-Leste has some powerful backing.
We do have very good friends in very high places who are willing to do that extra effort.
Among them, this man, Pierre Richard Prosper, was the United States Ambassador at Large for War Crimes and the UN Special Ambassador for War Crimes in Rwanda. His law firm's fighting ConocoPhillips in the courts for Timor. The company says it's complied with all its obligations.
Our view is that taxes were owed. Our view was that they knew they should have paid the taxes.
Although the two countries share the tax revenue, with 10% going to Australia, Australian authorities have refused to sign a memorandum allowing Timor liberal access to Australia to audit the records of resources giants, citing concerns about national sovereignty. How do you feel about the attitude of the Australian taxation authorities?
Well, it's puzzling. I think that's probably the best way to put it.
These are two countries very close to each other, but we are a smaller country, and we can't expect that Big Brother helps us a little bit here and there.
Even without that help, Timor is confident of gaining big money in back taxes. The broader question is, how does Timor-Leste diversify its economy? Because, like the resources themselves, the money from oil and gas won't last forever.
Stephen Long with that report.